We use the Flight of the Valkyrie. It's very inspiring music. Makes me always feel like marketing is coming to the rescue. It's almost like a cavalry charge, just like ready to go. All right. Yeah, I know. That's pretty cool. All right. So welcome to the Unified CXM Experience. And as always, I'm your host, GradCon CXO at Sprinkler. And this is always one of my favorite shows. We're doing an interview show today with a CMO. Today we're introducing Sonia Sahney, and she is the CMO for molecular imaging and CT scanners at GE Healthcare, which sounds like just an awesome job. And as some of you know, I did work in healthcare many years ago in Microsoft Research, so and I had a chance to actually work pretty closely with GE, which is one of the great healthcare companies out there, and just generally one of the great companies in general. So, Sonia, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Grad. So excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you're here. I know it's a Friday afternoon, and there's a lot going on. It's super busy. The world is crazy right now, but I do appreciate the time you're taking to just connect with us. We'll talk about marketing a bit. I think we'll start, though, by talking about Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, Canada, which we share in common. So what year did you graduate, and what was your degree?
I graduated Queen's in 2003, and I graduated in biomechanical engineering. So
Nice.
We were the purple jacket people.
So you're a plumber.
Exactly. And you?
So was your jacket? It was gold initially. Did you just like get it purpled, or do you have any gold
Yes.
left on your jacket, or how purple did it get?
So my jacket was not the best example of a jacket because you're supposed to duct tape all the zippers and whatever buttons are on there so that when you dye it purple, you don't mess up that. And then you're supposed to remove that duct tape and then fix what
Right.
didn't get dyed. I never ended up fixing what didn't get dyed. And you're supposed to also kind of rough it up in the first few days. And so I threw mine on the road, and then a bus came and took it down the street. So
Roughed
mine
it
got
up.
really roughed up very
Holy
quickly. So it doesn't
smokes.
even zip up. And I don't know, it's in my parents' house somewhere.
Wow, that's I like that spirit though. You really went for it.
I tried.
Yeah, my jackets actually still looks like pretty new. So I was a commie, am 85, and I have a purple jacket, commerce jacket. But
Yes.
I actually all my friends were engineers. Actually, one year at homecoming, I was completely purple, like face and hands, and it took me a long time for that to come off. But the my jacket has flecks of it all over it, but didn't get completely purpled like the engineering jackets. That's pretty cool. So,
Yeah.
avid reader of golden words, or kind of what was your favorite part of your Queen's experience?
Yes. Yes, avid reader. Actually, one of my kind of friends from school was a writer there, and one of still the funniest writers I know. And it was that was definitely a good part. Clark Hall Pub was a good part.
Nice.
We had a nice kind of spot at Queens. Where was it? Johnson and near the church, that giant St. Mary's Cathedral. It was a
Right.
beautiful place there. So we really enjoyed our experience. Yeah.
Yeah,
How
I
about
loved
you?
it. Well, I actually worked on the Commerce newspaper, the Commerce Chronicle,
Yeah.
but a huge amount of respect for Golden Words. I just thought that still I think is one of the great campus newspapers. I think it's not as recognized as
Absolutely.
it should be. I think it's one of the great campus newspapers, anywhere. But there's one thing I really miss from Queens, and this is something you would not have known about. But there was the engineering pub. For some reason, Commerce Society never had a pub, so which doesn't really make a lot of sense. But the Alfie's was actually run by a bunch
Yeah.
of Comstock people. So I guess we
Right.
kind of sort of thought of Alfie's as where we were kind of getting, but would have been nice to just generate the revenue. But there was a pub that I loved. It was called the Quiet Pub, and that was the Arts and Science Pub. And it's been gone for a while. It's been gone since sort of the mid to
Okay.
late 90s, but it was literally a quiet pub. It was, you go in, there was no screaming or shouting or bands. It was just a place to have a nice drink, and they served cocktails. It was actually quite nice. Spent a lot of time in the quiet pub and had some really great memories there. But let's go on to marketing for a second. So
Sure.
let's talk a little bit about your job. It sounds like a pretty interesting job, obviously with some pretty serious technical hardware involved.
Yeah.
Molecular imaging is just a great set of words. You must be like just hilarious at family get-togethers. So tell me about molecular imaging and sort of what's all that about, and what kind of key things that you have to worry about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So, I'm essentially a product marketer,
Yep.
which means we are the marketing team for specific products as opposed to kind of the corporate or central marketing team at GE Healthcare. And with molecular imaging, it comprises of things people have probably heard of, maybe a PET CT scanner or a SPECT CT scanner or radio pharmacy, which generates the stuff that we inject into patients for a PET CT scanner.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay.
there's a lot of scanning going on there, a lot of imaging, and then as well CT scanners, which I think most people have heard of. So
Right.
that's pretty much the big iron equipment that we deal with. And mainly we work closely with hospitals, clinics. Radiologists are probably our biggest buying persona, and technologists who are the users of the actual equipment. So radiologists read the images, technologists use the equipment more or less,
Hmm.
and then administrators, so radiology administrators or hospital administrators. So that's kind of who we're trying to, sell our equipment to.
And do you consider yourself like a pure B2B play, or is there any part of what you're doing that's got a B2C component? Are you trying to reassure patients in any way or create any kind of patient preference? Or are you just straight focused on radiologists and the other folks that you mentioned a minute ago?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think that, well, there's two aspects to it. One is that I think in marketing, if you can tell your customer something about their customer,
Yeah.
you are providing a lot of
Ooh,
insight to
I
them.
like that. Well, let's
So
stay there for a second.
patients,
That's super profound.
sure.
Actually, we've had a lot of guests on this show. I've never heard anyone say that before. So let's say that again. I just want to make sure we double click on that for a second. I love that.
Yeah.
If you can tell your customer something about their customer and finish the sentence for me, what did you say after that?
Then you're more insightful to them. Then you're
Ah,
acting as a consultant to them.
right,
So the patient is the hospital's customer,
right.
especially in the US where it's, private healthcare. And so their customer is the patient. So if I can tell them something about their customer, the patient, then I provide value to them.
Huh. So
So
can you give
that's
me examples? Like I don't want to like tread into anything that's secret or,
sure.
but if
No,
there's
I mean,
any way of sort of just bring that to life for a second, like how would I, and maybe just let's walk through like you tell this thing and then what reaction do you get from your B2B customer with the information you share?
sure. So, there's lots of different aspects to this. One of the things that I would say we try to do is get a better patient experience. And of course, that sounds like the right thing to do, and people would do that. But when we do a study with patients and we find out that they get really anxious inside the bore of the CT scanner because it's this enclosed area, if we can talk to them and see what would make them feel more comfortable in there. What we did with pediatrics, pediatric patients, of course, harder to have them sit still. And when you're trying to take a picture, it's really important to have
Right.
patients, being still, lying down in the gantry. We had them color these little designs in the waiting room. And then when they go into the CT scanner, they see the same designs when they're looking up at the bore. And then
Huh.
that kind of calms them down because there's a
Well, that's
familiarity
cool.
there.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so, we did a little bit of work with patients to understand what would make them feel more comfortable, and familiarity was one of them. So that's how we kind of connected that all
Oh,
together.
what a neat idea.
Um,
I think I'm going to the wrong hospitals because they usually just strap me down and shove me in and tell me to shut up and stop moving. I don't get this kind of, this is really cool. So when someone does the drawing, is it the drawing itself that's put in there or is it actually projected
No,
through a,
it's just the same print. It's a kind of a complicated paisley looking design.
Huh.
And so they see that and then they go inside and they see that again. And
Wow,
I
that
think it
is
just
really
also feels
interesting.
less sterile
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
hospital room. The other thing is for patient safety. I mean, radiation dose is a big concern.
Yeah.
So when
Especially in
we,
CT, that the radiation dose is huge.
right, absolutely, a huge topic, but I wouldn't say it's huge. Radiation dose itself is getting quite low
Oh, is it really?
in
Oh,
CT.
okay.
Yes,
Well, you have to fill
absolutely.
me in on
So
that because I must be operating
yeah,
on old knowledge there.
yeah. No, I mean, I think there's been some huge strides. I'd say from the CT was introduced in the late 70s, and then I'd say in the 2000s, radiation dose went down significantly, and then again, it's gone down every decade. It goes down quite a bit.
Oh, great.
So,
Okay, cool.
yeah, it's a
So,
it's
like, how many chest X-rays would a CT scan be equivalent to today?
so I like to actually compare it to a flight. So because people take
Oh,
transatlantic
great
flights all the
idea.
time.
Love that.
Or I would actually also compare it to, so if you lived in Denver, which is maybe a little closer to the sun than some of the other places
Right.
you might live, but you're up in the mountains. If you live there, live and breathe there for a year, that's
Yeah.
probably uh, equivalent to a chest CT.
Huh.
So,
Wow. What a
I
great
mean,
way to do that. I like that.
yeah.
That's
So if you use
excellent.
something like an X-ray, you're getting much different information, So it's kind of apples and oranges because you get such a different amount of information with a CT scan than you do with an X-ray. So I don't like comparing
Okay.
those two. I like comparing it to something people kind of live and breathe and do
No, that's
every day.
excellent contextualization. Like, what about a plane flight? How many plane flights are in a CT scan or vice versa?
So, you can do and it also depends on size, right? So each person would have a different amount of radiation dose dependent on their size,
Yeah.
and what we're scanning. And
Right.
so a flight from New York to London is about half a unit that we use of radiation dose, half a
Okay.
unit.
So a round trip
Um,
New York to London is kind of the same as getting a CT scan.
no, depends on what part of the body. So if you did a
Ah.
head CT
Yeah.
scan, then yes, probably
Okay.
a flight round trip is the same as one head CT scan. I
Well,
think
most
that's
people
about
say that
right.
my head needs to be scanned on a regular basis, so maybe I'll just intersperse it. Next time I'm planning on
Yeah.
going on vacation in Europe, I'll just get a CT scan instead.
Rotate, right?
Yeah, I'll
One of
rotate it.
each.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, by the way, I think that's brilliant doing it that way because I don't think a lot of people think of getting in an airplane as being radiation or getting a radiation dose.
Right. Exactly. Or just living and breathing, or eating a banana is actually radiation dose. So there's a lot of
Eating a
things that
banana? Oh, wait a
people don't
second.
know.
Wait, I'm not gonna let you get
Yes.
away on that one that easily. What do you mean eating a banana is a radiation dose?
There
Inquiring
is
minds want to
radiation.
know.
I know there is radiation in bananas. I would have to Google how much
Really?
radiation in eating a banana. I mean, obviously the measurement is very different,
Yeah.
but there is a small amount of potassium that's considered radioactive, and so it's very small comparatively. You'd have to eat
Oh, because of the
bunches of
potassium.
bananas. Yes,
Huh.
you'd have to eat a lot of bunches of bananas to be anywhere close to a scan of any sort. But
Oh,
radiation sources are all around. Is basically where I'm going
fascinating.
with that.
That is awesome. I'm gonna look at bananas in a completely different way now. All right. Okay. Well, what
We're
happens if you?
diverging. We're diverging.
Well, no, no. Yeah, I know. We get back, but I guess, like, what happens if I eat a banana while I'm flying to London for a CT scan? Like, how do you like? Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
It
Okay,
just,
so
yeah, exponential. It just triplicates right
wow.
there.
Okay, that is great. Okay, so how do we get on this topic? Okay, so we
Because we
were.
were
You're
talking about patient safety and
that's right. That's what
radiation
it was.
dose and telling your customer something about their customer.
Thank you for staying on track. I appreciate that. Okay, yeah. So the thing that I was kind of really jumping on there was this idea of being a trusted advisor, as you were saying, by providing. And I thought the example you used of creating a familiar environment, is that the way you phrased it? I thought that was really
Right.
cool. Are there any other examples like that, or like what other kinds of things do you sort of tell radiologists that help them think about what they're doing in a different way?
I think there's a lot of things we kind of guide them on. It really depends on, what they're doing. We try to create, one touch type automation for the systems so that the technologist, the person who's using the system, is spending more time with their patient instead
Oh,
of spending more time pressing buttons, setting things up, taking things down. So,
got it.
that's, I think, another pretty deliberate thing that we do, build in as much automation into the system, so that, they're doing the thing they're supposed to do, which is
Right.
make the patient feel comfortable, make them sit still, lie still, do all of
That's
that.
awesome.
So, yeah, it's pretty
So,
cool.
how do you get this patient insight? What's your source of insight, and how do you what just maybe help us understand a little bit about how you find it, and then how do you determine whether it is an insight or not? Sometimes one person will say something. I'll give you a quick example, and then how do you distill that into something that you can? It sounds like you're distilling it into things that influence the product team itself and the product itself, which is very cool. Actually, that's real marketing, right? And then also, how do you explain things to your customers? But I have this one funny story. It's a pretty old story now, but we used to do focus groups at Procter and Gamble every Friday, and Nielsen ran them for us. And it was just one of many ways that P&G always helped us stay really close to our customers. We would do, in-home visits was, my gosh, some of the biggest insights we had and some of the biggest things we did in the detergent category came from going and just watching people do their laundry. And it was amazing what you can learn when you do that. Now, that's a good story for another day, Randy. Let's make a note to talk about in-home laundry visits. But one of my favorite stories I was doing, it was a focus group. And focus groups are typically not super duper honest. So that's where I'm kind of going with you on this one. And I jokingly say focus groups are a place where you pay people to lie to you. And we had this one focus group where everyone was trying to be like, trying to present themselves the way they want others to see them, right? That's kind of part of the human condition and part of what happens in focus groups. I want to be
Sure.
seen as whatever I want people to think of me, and that's usually maybe a better version of myself.
Of
But there
course.
was this one woman, I don't remember her name, but she was just wonderful. She was super tired, and she had like 4 kids or something like that, and she was clearly like burning the candle at like all 12 ends. Just it was just
Right.
a lot going on in her life. And everyone was talking about how they do their laundry and all this like wonderful laundry habits and stuff like that. And she sort of was just like, I don't know. She said, she just kind of shook her head. And she said, don't you hate it when like, you put in a load of laundry and then you like don't get back to it for like 3 or 4 days because you're so busy. And then when you like open the washing machine, it's all covered in mold and you have to wash it again.
Silence.
Silence, right? Like pin drop silence. And the room, like everyone in the room, they slowly like just rotated their heads toward her in like horrified looks in everyone's faces. And one person said, "Mold?" And then she was like, "Yeah." And then she was like, "Whoa," and you could just see her go, oh, "I should not have said that." And what it was like this brief moment, and we could never drill in to understand if that was a common thing or not. It was very, very, very hard to ever figure out if that's something that people dealt with on a regular basis because people were horrified to admit that this happened to them, and I suspect it's actually more common, but we couldn't get there. So that's the framing of it. So help
Yes.
me understand so you know where I'm going with this, right? Which is
Yes.
how do you really distill what people are really saying and what they really, and how do you go through that, and then how do you bake that into something that you can use?
So funny you should ask that. I mean, I think it's a journey. I think we need to continue improving on how we get customer insight.
Yeah.
So that changes, and as you said, in things like focus groups or you know, even these third party interviews that happen, and they don't know we're listening, double blinded studies, all of that. There's always a question on that. It sounds like the in-home laundry visits that you reference are something similar that we're also being more deliberate about. So we are going into sites and just watching them for the day and seeing
Wow. Okay.
how they
Perfect.
operate. I actually gave my team a challenge this year that I said 5% of your time, which means every
Wow.
quarter, 3 days, you go
Yeah.
into a site. And to be honest, like these are marketers and they definitely have customer connections. So there's no, I think, big deal to really go into a site, make a connection, and go talk to a site that has our equipment, or maybe even a site that doesn't have our equipment. Wouldn't that be an interesting amount of
Right.
information you can gather there?
Right.
And then, we have them kind of come back with that information. The other thing that's interesting, which may be unique in our field, is when we have our equipment installed somewhere, we have people who go in, we call them the application specialists. They go in and teach them how to use the system for 5 days. And they come back every so often for follow-up visits. They are a wealth of knowledge. We have field engineers who go in to service the equipment, annually, and they're a wealth of knowledge. And if anything
Right.
breaks, they go in. So,
Right.
gathering all those insights from all the various people in GE healthcare, but also the people who are, you know, the customers, the people who are already getting that information, and then us ourselves going and sitting and watching them do stuff. And then once we get our rhythm going of us going in to watch the sites, I would love to drag a few engineers with me so that they will, watch this and see, and they're excited. They'd love to go and see that the problems that they're solving in the office are the problems that our customers actually have. So it's a
That's great.
journey. We're not
Yeah.
in ideal state yet, but I think the intention is right.
Well, yeah, I love that discipline you're putting in place. People talk about being customer centric, but until you're really spending time, you can't. You're just pretending if you're not really doing what you just talked about. Another thing I heard the other day, and it was Ardith Albee was a guest on the show a couple weeks ago, and she made this great comment that's been really sticking in my brain. Let me give it to you, and like we can talk about it. But she said she does a lot of B2B. She's a B2B marketing strategist, and she'd written an article that I had kind of randomly ran across, and I thought the article was brilliant, and I did a whole show on it, and then we brought her on the show, and we interviewed her, and I was like even more brilliant. She's like genius. But she made this comment, which is a lot of companies say they're customer centric, but they express their business goals through the lens of their own company. We want to grow 30%, or we want to sell 100,000 units, or we want to make $1 million, or whatever. Like metrics that they're about their company. And she said she posed this as a challenge because she said she hadn't seen anyone do this. And the challenge that she posed was, if you're truly customer centric, wouldn't your mission, vision, and KPIs be expressed in terms of your customers' outcomes? Just think about that for a second, right? So you start to think, instead of the mission being to, be the world's leading software company, and let's just make it something generic, would it be for our customers to, double customer satisfaction scores? That would be your mission.
Right.
Or that instead of your goal to be grow the business 30%, it would be to allow customers to save 25% on every, say in your case, scan that they do or whatever.
Right.
I've been sort of tossing this in my brain for the last couple of weeks, ever since we talked about it, because it got pretty far-reaching implications for how you think about a business. But just because we're chatting here and having a good time,
Yeah.
what do you think? How does that? Because you do sound. I mean, what I love about the way you're talking about what you do is you're very customer centric. You're digging right in, getting on site, talking to people. That's not as common as one would think, right? But if you were to reframe what you're doing in customer terms, could you? Would you? How would you do that?
So we try to, I would say.
Okay.
What she's saying, I think customer outcomes would be, I wouldn't say we do customer business outcomes, but we do to a certain extent. So let me give you an example. We have some customers with some really old equipment, and they haven't updated this equipment in, I don't know, 15 years. And to be honest, there's no technology I have that's 15 years old anymore. It's not such great technology anymore. If you think about all this, stuff that you have that's considered technology, or high-end technology, you don't have anything that's your phone, your TV. Most of it's not 15 years. So what we tell them, or what we measure before we go to them as why you should replace this, is we do kind of what you can consider like a time motion study. And we say, okay, today, what you're doing, you're getting 10 patients through in a day.
Mm,
You have, or you have, say,
right.
half-hour time slots for your patients, call it half-hour time
Right.
slots for an 8-hour day. You get 16 patients through a day. With our system, you can go faster. There's less clicks. It's more automated, whatever that reason might be, that we think you can get 3 patients through per hour, and 3 times 8, 24 patients through a day. So you can get 8 more patients through a day. And what does that mean for them? 8 more patients times however much a CT scan costs based on, whatever they're scanning. That's that's more revenue for them. Without opening up the 8-hour slot to a 10-hour slot, they're still paying their staff for an 8-hour day. They're getting 8 more patients a day. Over a course of a year, that can translate to a lot of extra revenue. So we do try to financially quantify the benefits of our equipment.
Do you ever talk patient safety? Is that a compelling argument, or is it the financial argument that's more compelling?
Well, what we do also try to do is for equipment that's older, we try to provide upgrade paths for things like patient safety. So, we might not be able to fully automate it and make it go faster, but we do provide some of the radiation dose reduction software that we've come up with, or things like that,
Hmm.
that they can kind of make it backward compatible. So I think from that standpoint, we do try to protect it in other ways. Um, and it is very variable in terms of patient radiation dose. So radiation dose is pretty much the topic when it comes to patient safety, and it gets so hard to quantify because every sized patient, every part of
Right.
the body, every preference. I mean, more radiation dose means a prettier picture also. So if the
Oh,
radiologist
interesting.
wants to see a prettier picture, they might be okay with doing a
Right.
little bit more radiation dose. So,
Huh.
there's a lot of variability in how to quantify that.
Very cool. Wow, this has been so interesting. I have really enjoyed this. All right,
Yeah.
so let me ask one last question because we're kind of on time, and I, by the way, really appreciate the time you've given us today. It's been awesome. So I always like to ask people, and we can reframe this if you're like, I don't know if I can go there, or I don't have a thing there. But I always like to ask people what they consider their greatest marketing challenge, and this is like sometimes people ask the question as, what keeps you up at night? And sometimes people say, what are you most worried about? I don't love those ones because, you know, no matter what's going on in my life, nothing keeps me up at night. So I'm not sure, like, so people ask me that question, I go, nothing. But I do think there's always a greatest challenge, the thing that is taking the most amount of time, or maybe the thing that we're spending more time on as a team, or the thing that we're working on more. So help me understand, what's your greatest challenge? Where are you investing most of your, or a lot of your mental bandwidth and team effort?
It's a good question. I think right now the greatest challenge, especially in the environment we're in, masks on, masks off, travel and don't
Mm,
travel, red countries, blue countries, all of that. We were in a world where we used to have giant trade shows and people would just show up. Everybody would know about our product because there were, balloons and streamers and marching bands. And now we're in a world
well, I've
where,
been to HIMSS many, many, many times, and the GE booth was always the best. Like you always
thank
had
you.
an incredible booth. Like it was always we did okay at Microsoft, but boy, the GE booth always was just like I was so jealous.
Thank you.
So anyway, so keep going. So
So
yeah,
so
but
we
that day
we
is
do
over.
that.
You're right.
I
Yeah,
think those days are kind of
yeah.
getting past us. The other thing is, even as part of our regular sales process, site visits where people would go to another site, similar size, and go watch how those people scanned and what they did and get a chance to talk to them. So think of it like a test drive almost of, such a big equipment. Don't really test drive it in your own house. You go to another site, see how they do it. And people are like, I don't want to travel anymore.
Mm.
For 2 years, I did it without traveling. Why do I have to travel now to go see it? So how do we bring the experience to them? How do we make sure that they know when we launch a new product, because they may not have come to that big giant trade show, which isn't so big and giant anymore? How do we get that awareness out there? And so for the 40, 50,000 GE systems floating around, how do we make sure they know what's out there, know what the next thing is, really drive that awareness.
Wow, that is a big challenge. Yeah.
Yes, we're working on it.
Well, no, it's a huge challenge because, in many of these industries, we became very comfortable and reliant on these big shows.
Yeah,
They were there and they were amazing because everybody went to them. It's a
right.
completely different world. And GE was big enough and important enough that no matter, you may not have been able to visit every single booth at HIMSS. In fact, no one could possibly visit every single booth at HIMSS. At the one point, it was the largest trade show period in the world. But I think everyone went to the GE booth.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't miss that booth, right? So anyway, well, this has been amazing, Sonia. Thank you for the time. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it. I'm going to close in a second, but any last thoughts or anything else you want to to have people think about in the audience, or anything you want to close with?
I don't think so. I think we had a good conversation about customer centric, and I think that's a very big deal. I think making sure that you're doing something that you're telling your customer something about their customer is really what we're trying to get towards.
That's a
I
big
think that
idea.
helps them quite a bit. You act more of a
That's a big idea.
consultant than as a trying to sell them equipment.
Yeah,
Changes
no,
the
that's
game.
my key takeaway from today's conversation. Is amazing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So I'm just going to close now. So we've been talking with Sonia Sahney. She is the CMO of molecular imaging and CT scanners at GE Healthcare. Very generous with her time with us today, and we had a really great conversation. Sonia, thank you very much for the unified CXM experience. I'm Brad Kahn, and I'll see you next time.